welcome back to a Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. Flipping Texas blue has been a Democratic goal for what seems like forever. The electoral map in Texas looked like a sea of red with isolated blue islands for years. Election after election, the population centers are blue, but everything else is red. Republicans have kept a pretty solid grip on the state government for a long time now. But Texas Representative James Talarico says that has got to change. He feels that his party has a moral imperative to flip Texas blue, and that he feels the administration is pushing back against him and his campaign because they genuinely fear that he may be able to effect that change. He was quoted as saying, "There is something happening in Texas. It is our job to harness that energy, to channel that backlash into a win at the ballot box. We have a moral imperative to win this race in November, because if we don't win, we can't help people." And I think he's definitely right. For a very long time, I've been saying that Texas would really benefit from a change from red to blue. And there have been a few times in the recent past where it's felt like it's almost there, that a blue Texas might not be just a Democrat dream. But every time it seems to get close, it always falls apart right at the important moment. We've been here before. Beto O'Rourke felt like he was the man to finally do it and get Texas Democrat. But as we know, that never happened. So while I find it hard to argue with his premise that essentially Democrats have to make Texas blue for the good of the country as a whole, getting that to actually happen is the hard part. As I've said, the big cities in Texas are already a lock. Houston, Dallas, all of those are solid blue. They don't need to be convinced. It's the rest of the state, the more rural parts, where Democrats have seemingly had an unending uphill battle to convince those voters not to continuously vote for the Republicans in every election. Texas has been a red state in every presidential election since Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. And it's not hard to see why when you see just how much voter disenfranchisement occurs in that state. By some estimates, if it weren't for that voter suppression, Texas would have been blue years ago. And it is precisely in this environment that Talarico finds himself in a fight for the Texas Senate seat. It seems like Texas wants to be blue, but it can't find a way to actually pull it off. And many are hoping Talarico is exactly what Democrats have been waiting for all this time. And he just may have exactly the right combination of factors to actually do it for once. By all accounts, he's very likable, which is, of course, something that not all politicians can say. But more than just regular likable, Talarico is likable in a way that doesn't entirely turn off more conservative-minded individuals, something even most Democratic politicians can't claim. And when they really think about it, Texas voters would actually benefit greatly from Democratic leadership. Time and time again, that Republican elected officials have let them down and shown how Republican leadership has been bad for the people of Texas. So more of the same is probably going to just result in more of the same. But understandably, even if you ignore the voter suppression aspect, selling a Democrat in the largely red Texas is a tall order. Outside of the major cities, most Texans are used to a way of life that is seemingly incompatible with a more liberal mindset. Guns, God, and country are what they care the most about. So Democrat finding a way to penetrate that mindset, it's been what has eluded them for so long, and what their Republican opponents have depended on for keeping themselves in power over and over again. Loosening that Republican grip on Texas is key to the broad national change that we need to get out of our current Trump-led national situation. I don't know if I myself would frame it as a moral imperative to flip Texas, but I do think it is imperative. On that, I definitely do agree. And if getting James Talarico into the Senate is a step in that direction, I'm all for him. If I was a Texas voter, I know he'd have my vote. And I know I'm not the only one. There have been so many people saying that they've never contributed to a political campaign before, but his is the very first that they have contributed to. He is getting people to believe that he can do it, that he can go all the way, make it to Senate, and do the kind of change that we've needed so desperately for what feels like forever. It also feels like forever since we'd been able to actually believe in a politician, who isn't just saying things to get you to vote for him. But this guy really does seem genuine, and people are really gravitating towards that. And I think one thing that definitely brought a lot of people towards his side was his recent appearance on Stephen Colbert's Tonight Show, where his interview with Colbert was pulled off the air by CBS, the network that runs The Tonight Show, under suggestion by Trump's FCC. As a result, instead of airing it on television, as it would have been, Colbert put it on YouTube for the people to see. Now, even before people heard the interview, they were already ingratiated towards him, because if the administration were putting pressure on networks to not put this interview out, they clearly are showing that they are afraid of what he has to say. And that's the kind of guy we want a government pushing back against the Republicans. If they fear him, he must be really something. Republicans have made it pretty clear that they would much prefer his Democratic opponent, Jasmine Crockett, to get the Democratic nomination. They see her as someone who is much easier to beat, because she doesn't seem to really resonate with Texas voters quite the way Talarico does. For a Democrat to win in Texas, they have to do three things. They have to engage Democratic base, engage independent voters, and if they possibly can, bring in some of the Republican voters to vote for them. Those stars really have to all align in the Lone Star State. Jasmine Crockett definitely has the Democratic voters, but it's those other two groups that she would have immense trouble attracting. She'd be going up against a lot of the problems that led Kamala Harris to lose the 2024 presidential election. She's a woman of color, and outside of those deep blue cities, that's not something that wins you Texas votes. If she were the one who ended up on the Democratic ballot, many independents and disillusioned Republicans would simply not vote at all, handing that Senate seat to the Republicans. And there's certainly an argument to be made that that shouldn't be the way it is, but because that is the way it is, the Republicans are hoping that she will get the Democratic nomination over Talarico, because they know that she is not a winning candidate in that place at this time. Talarico, on the other hand, can very possibly pull all three off. Many independent voters who have not previously felt that they align with Democratic rhetoric, but now don't feel like they can be more closely aligned with Republicans, have really found Talarico attractive, many of which have pledged to vote for him and vote Democrat for the first time. He may even be able to pick up the elusive Republican vote. Many Texas Republicans who have become disgusted with the current GOP based on things like their radical immigration enforcement and the revelations of the Epstein files may be willing to vote Democrat if it's a candidate that doesn't quite fit the image of the radical left that they've been fed all these years. Talarico may be Democrat, but for them he may feel like a softer Democrat, one that they can actually be willing to embrace. And that could conceivably make a huge difference. He has an eloquence and approachability that can really bring in a lot of voters that may not otherwise be willing to vote at all, and some that may have previously voted Republican who now will vote blue for the first time ever. But as good as his chances seem, as great as his message is, it can be sometimes hard to keep that hope alive. We've been here before, as I said before. Things start looking really good for Democrats in Texas right up until they don't, and the Republicans win it again. You want to believe that change in Texas is possible, but time and time again, Texas voters seem to say, no, we don't want change. We want what we've already got, and that is Republican rule over our state government. Yes, a lot of the reason Texas has been red for so long is gerrymandering. A lot of it is voter disenfranchisement, making it incredibly hard for more rural voters to actually make their ways to the polls to cast their votes. But a lot of it is also that many of those Texas voters simply want Texas to remain red indefinitely. And it doesn't matter how nice their Democratic candidate is or how good of a campaign they run, they're up against that red wall. And sometimes it can feel like there's no way to get through it. But James Talarico is saying, not only can it be done, but I can do it. And while it can be hard to cling to that hope, I actually think that maybe he's right. I wouldn't hold my breath for him to bring in a lot of Republicans to his side, or maybe even a huge amount of independents who would otherwise just not vote at all. But theoretically, he doesn't have to. He only has to bring in enough. And I think he can bring in enough to win that election. and make himself a Democratic senator from Texas. And his win will absolutely re-engage a lot of the people that have thus far felt hopeless when it comes to politics and that there's no way out. Former President Obama once ran on a platform of hope and change. James Talarico could live up to that and be that hope and change that we've all been waiting for. All right, guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you find it.